In the previous segment, we looked at lasers. We saw the introduction to what lasers are. We learned that there are two phenomena which are responsible for the generation of laser light. One of them being simulated emission, the other being repeated amplification. We learned that simulated emission is responsible for generating the photons which make up laser light. How, though, we did not see in much detail. And we looked at repeated amplification in quite some depth. We saw how it is responsible for the intensity and other such properties of lasers. Now in this section we will be looking at simulated emission and how these photons are actually produced. But before we dive into simulated emission full-fledged, we are going to study the interaction between matter and radiation. So there are three types of phenomena which happen when electrons shift from one energy level to another, and when some sort of energy or radiation is applied to them. So we will first look at those three phenomena and then we will understand simulated emission. So the three phenomena are simulated absorption, spontaneous emission and simulated emission. So let's now try to see what they are. Let us assume there are two energy levels, E1 and E2. All matter, as you know, is made up of atoms. The atoms contain a nucleus which contains the neutrons and protons. The nucleus is surrounded by electrons which are located in different energy levels. These energy levels are quantized. All this is information you are already familiar with at this point. Now let us take one particular atom of any material. We consider two energy levels E1 and E2, which are occupied by N1 and N2 electrons respectively. So E1 and E2 represent the energy of those two levels, and N1 and N2 are the number of electrons present currently in the respective levels. Now when a suitable amount of energy or radiation is given to this atom, there are three phenomena which can occur: simulated absorption, spontaneous emission and stimulated emission. We will look at them one by one. To give you a high level overview of these three, simulated absorption is when energy is provided to this atom. The electrons at the lower energy levels, they take up this energy, they break free from the forces that are binding them and they move to the higher energy levels. This is the most basic electron movement which we have been studying about right from high school. That is called simulated absorption. Why stimulated? Because there is a stimulus which is triggering this movement. The stimulus being the radiation, the heat or whatever energy you are supplying. The movement is not happening autonomously. Some amount of energy is being given which triggers this shift from the lower energy level to a higher energy level. Hence simulated. And absorption, because the higher level is absorbing the electrons from the lower level. That is simulated absorption. The very simple process where you provide energy, the lower energy level electrons take up that energy, they break the binding forces and move to the higher levels. What is spontaneous emission? The electrons which thus moved to the higher levels, they come back to the lower levels because they find the higher level too unstable for them. They come back to the lower level to remain in a stable region, and in doing so they release a photon. So why does this happen? Let's say this electron which is at E2 currently, it was, let us assume it was present in E1 first. It acquired some energy and went to E2 as part of stimulated absorption, right? Now it finds E2 to have too much energy which it is unable to bear with, or for some reason it wants to come back to E1 and remain in its stable orbit. So it will naturally give out the energy it acquired in order to come back to a lower energy level, right? Because now it has more energy than required for E1. So the additional energy h nu, which is E2 minus E1, this electron will give out and it will come back to its original position E1. And that energy which it gives out, it releases in the form of a photon. A photon is a particle which emits light. So that process is called emission, coming back from a higher level to a lower level and releasing your extra energy in the form of a photon is called emission. Now this emission again is of two subtypes. Spontaneous emission is, as the name suggests, when this emission process is spontaneous. The electron just comes down by itself of its own accord because it finds the higher level too unstable. There is no no stimulus you are giving which is triggering this emission. That is spontaneous emission. In stimulated emission, on the other hand, like stimulated absorption, you are offering some radiation, some energy which triggers the electrons coming down. Now you might wonder, generally when we provide energy, the electron takes that and moves to a higher level. Why would it take energy and come down? So in this case, in stimulated emission, we are not providing energy for the electron to absorb and move up. The radiation you provide propels the electron to give out the photon it has. So it is sort of, you shine light on the electron or heat or temperature, some sort of energy, electrical energy, electrochemical energy, whatever. You are sending particles of some sort of energy to that electron, trying to bring out the extra energy in the electron. So once the extra energy has been pulled out by the radiation which you sent, the electron will jump back to its original lower energy state. So that is stimulated emission. So these are the three phenomena which can occur when an electron is moving between two energy states.